So guys, this is our star-studded panel. I'm super excited to be sharing with this panel, to be leading this panel, but not sharing, leading this panel, because almost 1 year ago, I actually stalked Monsum. We were in Hong Kong, and he was also giving the keynote at that conference. And I cornered him and I said, "You have to come to Manila." And he really wanted to run away, but I think because I was so kulit, he just had to say yes to me. And I feel like he wanted to say no, but this was 1 year ago, ha. And then 6 months later, I saw him again in Shanghai. So I ran after him and I said, "You're coming to Manila, right?" I think at that point he wanted to be like, "Sige na nga," just because she's so kulit. So thank
And
you.
that's the reason why I'm here too.
The same thing. Unfortunately, we've had somebody to cancel. But wait a minute. Sorry. We have a special request. So this is another person I cornered. Mr. Chat. I can't say your surname. Mr. Chatpong Chatanov. Chatpong Chatanov. I also met this gentleman here at the same conference, and I said, "You have to come to Manila." No questions asked. Voila, they're here. So thank you guys so much for being here. And of course, Buck has been so supportive of Anthology. Anyway, let's begin now. Let's start talking about sense and sensibility and perception and how these all affect and play a role in architecture. I think before we started the panel, I just went over to Mr. Nazareno and I said, "Can you give me código? What is your flagship project at the moment?" And I just found out that he's working on the De La Salle Dasmariñas College of Architecture and Engineering, and that's actually a very, very fascinating building, especially because the way I believe the way you would design has great effect, especially on students in their formative years. So maybe you can shed light into what you're doing with the building in order to influence and shape the perceptions, the way students perceive architecture, and just shed light a bit on that.
Oddly enough, when we were tasked to do the project, given that it was an architecture and an engineering school, there was a very limited at one point TOR, where the school campus is in a community where the architecture is very traditional. Just like La Salle, Wong is not familiar with that. It's a school here in the Philippines where the architecture is very traditional, with very strong door colonnades. They asked us, Rika, to have an architecture building that spoke the same language as De La Salle University's campus, local campus. And one of the things we had to fight for was to make sure that this was not the case. We understood that we had to shape the minds and the sensibilities of future architects, and we could not afford to not give a piece of advice to the board of De La Salle to make sure that they, along with their architects, if they were going to end up hiring us, be able to form them in a way where architects needed to think freely out of the box without limitations. And we won out in that discussion, and it should be done in a few months' time. And I'm not sure if anyone here is from De La Salle Dasmariñas, but we have had instances and discussions with students of De La Salle Dasmariñas, and they have become part of our process in designing the building. And it's a wonderful process where students are part of shaping their own campus. And, it's a fun project. It's a fun project.
What did the students ask for?
Honest to goodness, bathrooms.
With tissue
They didn't
paper,
have
I
enough.
hope.
But yeah, other than that, they 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 really asked us to make sure that this campus was a campus that I mean the architecture campus was something that they could be proud of. They could be proud of it. They wanted to make sure we didn't do something that spoke about LaSalle's architecture.
Okay, when does that get completed?
Sorry,
When does that get completed?
August.
Ooh,
this year.
exciting. Anyway, moving on, I think one of the things I'd also like to ask, it turns out that Mr. Monsum also has worked on LaSalle, but School of the Arts in Singapore. How have you used, or what elements have you used to sort of invoke experience and just emotion in the students in the building?
I want to talk about toilets first.
Sure.
I love toilets, and if I were to ask for anything, I will always say I want the best toilet possible in any building. And if you haven't noticed, if you go to Japan, that the toilets, particularly the
Warm.
toilets, you know, it will have the sound of water even though you haven't flushed it. Because ladies in Japan do not like people to know their inside or, you know, whatever they're doing, really. So the Toto actually invented the running water sound the moment there is someone in the toilet. That's to mask the fact that, you know, that's why I think toilets are very important. And I always try to do the best possible toilets in our designs, because this is where people are almost very private and almost very bare to their skin in a space, and hence you really need that sensibility for it, I think. So don't underrate toilets. I do think that we all should do the best toilets possible. Okay. So back to the School of the Arts in Singapore. When we won the competition, it was really based on clarity of the idea. And there were two ideas that we had. We were expounding on the idea of a multiple ground level, where we were creating a new ground level in the building where we could have a safe and secure environment for the students to actually study in, because it's right smack in the city. And then the other important principle about the design was at the ground level, where we actually have three major performing arts facility in the city. We wanted it to be porous and that it would be free access to the public 24 hours a day. So that was a very important gesture. Between the two, one is very safe and secure, where we limit the kind of access to the place in the upper stratum. The lower stratum was a public thoroughfare. So that's a very important criteria in our design that resulted in a very unique formal expression in the building. So I think that is the key principles that evolved the design.
Going back to the toilets, I must say he makes really good toilets. I had the pleasure of going to Alila Uluwatu, and your toilets are amazing. You literally sit down. It's kind of weird. Like, I'm gonna explain it, huh? You literally sit down and you're facing. It feels very open, but there's a wall, and then there's like a water feature, and then another wall, and so that was the best toot I've ever taken, ever. Just kidding. I didn't use it to do number 2. No. But speaking of senses, so you know, we talk about water, the sound of water. We talk about maybe even smell sometimes. We're talking about Japan. I know when you sit down on the toilets, they're always very warm. So you get that touch, that sense of touch. Baka, I'd like to ask you, in the project that you did with in Korjasu, that award-winning project in Cebu, did you? That was. I understand that it was a you went through a very collaborative process in with to be able to combine art and tectonic to evoke a certain intention. Could you maybe tell us about the intention and how you used sensibilities, not only visually, but also in other senses of perception to achieve that?
So during my time, of course, with experience with architecture, especially in Cebu, we have actually been highly influenced with art and architecture. There's a highly intuitive approach to architecture in terms of Cebuano architects, those of my mentors and predecessors as well. And then what happened was, of course, Kenneth, as you've seen his work with our collaboration with this project, are actually very highly intuitive. They do a lot with their hands. It's really a lot of sketching. It's really a lot of feeling. And it's that embodied knowledge that I kind of also took in terms of my knowledge of architecture. Having said that, I also wanted to invoke a little bit more of an intellectual approach in terms of how I do things. So the beauty of that project was we disagreed on a lot of things, and we had to agree and really collaborated to a point that it took us 2 to 3 years of design process before really pursuing. So it was really like a relationship where you sometimes misunderstand each other, and that's the beauty of face value. We respect each other. When you work together already, then you discover there's so much more nuances and so much more that you can actually learn from each other. So that's how it came about. I think this was the 4th or 5th scheme that was really pulled off. And in a way, I actually said to Kenneth, show me what your intuition will tell you. So I actually gave that support role to him and say, show me what you wanted to intend in terms of that journey, in terms of the material. Of course, Kenneth is very good in terms of the vernacular material. So we actually used bamboo. He uses it in a smaller scale, but of course, right now, we had to do it in a bigger scale, in architecture, in a space. So with my tectonic background, at least with my technical background, I ensure that every curvature, every undulation has to be right. And that actually creates that sensibility, If it's done carelessly, even a person with a undisciplined eye or non-architecture eye will see. So those are things that we had to be very careful of to ensure that everything has to be set correctly. And that was the mold in terms of that journey where we wanted that undulation reflecting the ceiling of the bamboo all the way towards for the structure. So that was a very great 4-year design experience for me.
Well worth it.
It was well worth it. A lot of criticisms and failures, but I think that's a very good barometer to really improve and evolve.
As we start to talk about form, I think I'd like to take it to chat. I was looking at one of your projects, the Hotel Labaris. Is that how you pronounce it? Labaris. And I was looking at the roof and the sort of the undulating roof line that you have. Are you able to explore different senses like light? And how do you play with light and shadow? And how does that affect how you design? And do you use that in trying to achieve a certain intention?
That's a perfect segue, because I want to interject something that's out of the safe zone.
Sure, go.
Can I give you a little history, a preview of the lecture tomorrow?
Yes, you may. What time? Tell them.
4:30.
4:30.
2:30, sorry.
2:30. Which stage?
Garden.
Okay.
It's a little bit muddy
2:30
there.
garden. Catch
Tomorrow, though, it won't be so muddy, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it's not raining tomorrow.
With that project, it's a hotel resort set in the mountains of Thailand. It's about an hour away from Bangkok, and it's a unique resort town in the mountains where in the past 20 years, every resort has turned into a European fantasy land. There is an English mansion, a French chateau, there's an Italian hill town. And when the client approached me, I was like, oh my God, what's she gonna make me do? She took me to the English mansion, but she said she wanted me to up my game and showed me a slide of Harry Potter's A World of Wizarding, right? And so this is the ultimate, right? It tests your allegiance to modernism, right? Everybody has an allegiance to modernism. Who are students in here? Yes. Have you ever been taught to do anything else other than a modern language? I don't want to use the word style, language. No. What happens when somebody tells you they want to do Harry Potter? Secondly, what if you enjoy the fuck out of Harry Potter yourself? Right? There's a dilemma where is that bad taste if you enjoy popular culture? It could be. But is it bad taste to enjoy another language other than modernism? So that was the dilemma of that project. How do I integrate another language, which was European Disneyland based, but how do I create a perception that that language is worth considering intellectually, which is something I want to pass to the jury as well. And here in Manila, what if somebody wants you to do a Spanish language building rather than a modern building? Do you come into a dilemma as an architect? You say, oh my God, I have to do, it depends on which side of the fence you're on, right? And so that's a dilemma I want to talk about. I don't want to give away what my answer is because I want to hear about everybody else.
I want to refute what they're not responding with our students here. They're actually not given any choice or direction at all. And that's a challenge with our educational system, where it is always stemmed with functionality and practicality. So it doesn't always have to be modernism. Yes, they are.
Boring functionality and practice.
Exactly. Okay? So these are things that we actually are, at least with our circles, would want to challenge. And I know a lot of the students are inspired, creating a little bit more unique and creative work. But these things are actually an agenda for education as well, to really drive. I mean, we don't need to manipulate, but point a direction in terms of a language maybe. It doesn't have to be modern. But of course, I'm biased as well with modernism and the modern architecture. So yeah, we actually have that reaction, at least with our generation, that we reacted revolting against the thematic architecture that you see, and it's still very prevalent in the Philippines. But I believe it has actually improved as well in terms of that state.
I just have a feeling that even though I was raised in the system that we all were raised in a studio design system that really originated with Gropius, right? It's a modern-based studio system. To me, is outdated, and we don't realize we were programmed since its inception that we have to design this way because it originated in the West.
It's outdated. What should it be then? What do you believe it should be?
Oh my gosh. Look all around us, especially in Asia. I mean, look at all the languages that are available. I mean, to really study, we don't even have enough documentation in Asia to the level that we record Corbu to speak about anything intellectually. We don't. And that's our disadvantage. It doesn't have the legs for us to talk critically about. And I think it comes in terms of us really just documenting and analyzing and really thinking critically about a local language where you can speak intelligently about, so that we could have a conversation into specific details about specific moves for this language of architecture. I throw it back.
Well, when I was in school, I was asked by a professor of mine, told by a professor of mine, Anthony, it's actually okay to design a house with a gabled roof, okay? Because we all just pretty much did houses that were orthogonal and square, and the school was in the Bay Area. where there are a lot of Victorian houses, and that is pretty much the vernacular of
Can I give
San
context?
Francisco. Yes, go.
Bay Area San Francisco, not Bay Area Pasay and Parañaque, ha?
Sorry. But that is the vernacular in San Francisco. But in the end, we were even asked why we wouldn't do any gabled roof houses, and that was a question I had to pose on myself as well. Why we didn't do that? But I still don't.
We're throwing to you.
I just want to reply to Chad about his request that, about Harry Potter architecture. I'm quite intrigued by that, and I think you can't say no to clients who comes in, but you certainly need them to buy into it, because if you even hint that you don't agree with it, you know, the client would walk away, and you know your entire journey will be very tortured. So you do really need to embrace the client,
Yes.
and his thinking and his whatever he buys into. But then I have to say I actually visited the famous Harry Potter staircase in and it's in Portugal, in which town is that called? Not Lisbon, but the other one. Sorry, it escaped my memory.
So
at
there's
the
a
moment.
real historical
Port-
precedent.
Porto.
Porto.
Yes, it
There's
is
a
actually
historical
there.
precedent
and
for
there is
Harry
a
Potter.
huge queue to actually see this staircase, and it's a fabulous space, incredible. You should go see it. You know, and that whole idea of that imagery of Harry Potter reduced to just that staircase is mind-boggling. And I think the parallel I have about that staircase is actually with Escher. You know, with Escher, his staircases were flipping, transforming. It was an incredible experience, and I don't know whether people know, but if you follow Richard Hessel art, you will realize that the other founding director of WOHA actually is the only living artist who actually moves in the direction of Escher geometries and infinite geometry in doing art. And I think that itself is very relevant for a resort. Basically, you want people to go into a fantasy, and you want people to go into a place where their mind takes them to away from where they usually are, or from work whatsoever. So I think that is a very good way to relate to the client, and to also pursue your own agenda with the design. So that would be my reaction to you.
So you're almost reducing down whatever a language or a cliche, you can always look at it intelligently into something that has, because if it stirred an emotion in you, there has to be some spatial tools that were used to do that, which I think it's a great way to look at language. In the end, whether it's a curve, a concave, or a convex, it invokes a perception of, and a feeling that I want us to get away from the stigma of style, of how that's a bad thing, but you can actually think about it and talk about it intelligently, right?
Exactly. So it actually evokes emotion in terms of the client. It actually, their interpretation will probably be a perceived solution or an architectural style. Probably it moved them based on the fantasy of Harry Potter's staircase. And that's actually a responsibility to capture that in terms of the client's intangible needs, I would say, apart from just the functionality and the practicality that goes more than that. Architecture should go more than that. So yeah, I would believe that a lot of us would actually know how to capture that from our client, interpret that to them, and actually we can drive our agenda that is still very sensitive to their need. And actually that's, I'm sure you did a good job with that perception and space and
The
sensibilities.
jury's out.
Yeah. So that's something actually I've also learned recently in terms of really understanding clients, understanding how they they are odd with your work. Yes, they go to you, they get you, but sooner somewhere or another they will say, "I want something like this," and you basically ask what is the essence of what you're looking for and interpret that. And that's it's beautiful when you get that relationship and that interpretation, and you can do it on your own terms as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Kind of got lost there, just listening. I wish I was in the crowd as opposed to here.
Did you think you were going to talk about Harry Potter when you came to this
No,
session?
actually not. But in talking about Harry Potter, so no, because we're talking about typology. As we begin to start and talk about typologies, and we talk about perception and even entertainment, as retail sort of starts to die, with the rise of everything on the internet, entertainment and anything that's experiential has started to become more important. And I've noticed over the years that as previously a lot of things were about retail and about creating malls, now it's more about experiences. And I was recently in Japan and I went to Universal Studios. I never go to Universal Studios. How, if you were ever asked to design, say, a theme park, how would you start to, I guess, use culture and context, I don't know, to inform the project that you were to make? I don't know.
Well,
A theme park, mass youth theme park.
Well,
It would then be more about experience.
I mean, they're good and bad techniques in theme parks, right? I mean, you can go the cheap
And it's all-
way. Well, I don't know. It's all fake. A bad technique
It's
is
all
to,
recreated,
A bad
right?
technique is to rely on nostalgia alone, and you put up some iconography to get some cheap feelings. But if at another perception, theme parks, the really exciting ones are about heightened perception. It's like steroids. They're doing something that's pumping steroids into this experience, whether it's darkness or fear or happiness or whatever. There's a technique to it.
And it's very clear already. Theme parks are already. It's when you start talking about theme parks, whether it's Disneyland, there is already a. It has already come from a particular narrative. No, there is a storyline that you follow already. So,
Like Enchanted Kingdom.
well, Enchanted Kingdom is another
There's a
thing.
new one coming up.
I didn't mean to do this. I'm sorry.
You
Sorry,
started the
everyone.
theme park thing, but you know, I have Buck. We have Buck here, and I wanted actually to talk to him about his core Jesu, because I didn't have a chance to listen to his presentation. And one of the more difficult, I wouldn't say theme parks are not difficult, but one of the more difficult typologies that I think is asked of any architect is a place of worship or a church. There's a lot of emotion in having to design for a church, which I think you did very successfully. I haven't been to Cor Jesu yet, but we're all wired nowadays. Our phones are just attached to our hips, and having to go through a portal which you have to go through when you go to a place of worship, and just have your clients be shut off from a wired world is very difficult. I think that's something that you had to understand in terms of design. So I was just really wondering how you had to deal with that.
Well, definitely it's actually very related to our topic, perception and sensibility. Because when we design, we perceive things to be of this experience. It's not yet foolproof. So there was a lot of perception in terms of how we wanted a little bit of that journey when we wanted that bamboo portal at least perceiving that it should divide at least a busy street across of the main campus, and of course, journeying towards the chapel, that it has to be a little bit more solemn. So there was a lot of perception in terms of how we wanted, our intent in terms of that. And then we had the beauty of that, it was a lot of a trust with Kenneth and I, even to a point that the plan was very straightforward. I'm not so used to being very straightforward plans. I mean, I want some manipulation. And we had to have that conversation with Kenneth to say, let's make it a very simple plan, and then creating this very expressive roof. Well, it's just a curved roof, undulating. And then from there, it creates that dip, high to low, and all the way back to high, creating that perception again in terms of scale. And the beauty of the interiors was basically how we manipulated the bamboo slats from straight lines, coves, diagonals, and some curves. There was a lot of play, of course, a lot of studies that we do during the design process. And we wanted to create that heightened movement. So there was a lot of perception. We wanted to perceive that there has to be some movement towards that axis, going towards the altar. And I think we did a good job in terms of creating that framework. And the beauty of the sensibilities about that project as well, and we only realized, and I didn't, intended that to have, up to now, because of the 1,000 bamboo poles that you have, you can actually still smell the bamboo. And that's beautiful about sensibilities, about architecture, when you still feel the senses. It's not always about visual or functionality, all the way to every sense that you can see. Hopefully the sense of smell was a factor that, in a way, when you go there alone, I can still, I appreciated that we did that kind of gesture in terms of choosing the material as well.
You've done a really fantastic job with Corjesu. But as we were talking about typologies and expressing emotion and experience and feeling into these typologies, I actually think that the church is one of the easier ones, because you go there to cry, you go there when you're nervous, you go there to ask for something, you go there to ask for guidance. So this is a personal thing. I would love the opportunity to be able to do a church because of all the emotion that you would be able to capture in the feeling of a building. What I find more challenging, actually, are the more mixed-use buildings. So I'm going to throw this question over to Monsum. I'd like to ask you how you were able to capture all of that in Kampong Admiralty. On the ground floor, it's just a really massive open space. On the second floor, you have the hawker, and as you go up, I guess there's residences, and then above you have the sort of garden, right? So how are you able to capture so many different feelings and emotions into that one sort of little city within a city?
I would rather answer the question about the theme parks, really.
Oh, okay.
No,
Okay, let's go to theme parks.
I've got to talk about Kampong Admiralty at 6 p.m.
Okay.
And so that will be one of the projects I'll be talking about. But when someone comes to you and asks you to design a theme park, you jolly well know that you're almost at the end of your career.
I love that you like the toilets and the theme parks.
And I think in Singapore, we had the two integrated resorts. And when the potential bids came in, they went to names like Frank Gehry and Michael Graves. And Michael Graves did finish the building, and it's one of his. We were talking about horrible buildings in the career. I think that would be one of Michael Graves' not so proud moments. But nevertheless, Frank Gehry's solution was quite beautiful. But I think he must have had a cold when he did the design, because it was like crushed toilet, rather tissue paper, and it was a beautiful sculptural form that he came up for the design. But he didn't get it. But I did come close to getting a theme park.
What would a Woha theme park look like?
So we were asked to do a hotel in the new Mandai resort. And the Mandai is going to be a big thing. The nature park in Singapore would be like sort of, what is a dinosaur movie called? Jurassic Park. You would have a Jurassic Park in Singapore. I'm now promoting Singapore, of course. And it's incredible. They would have a rainforest theme park. They would have the current zoo, the night zoo, the river safari, and they also have one about the stars and whatever, you know. But we were asked to do the resort. And of course, we wanted to bid for it, you know. And it was a competition. We went in against a few of them. But for us, the idea of doing a resort in a wildlife destination was, our response was to hide and not reveal yourself, you know. Because you don't want to disturb the environment. It's to retreat and let it take second fiddle, you know. And that was our approach. It became so subtle that the client said, there is no design in it, you know. And they awarded the design to someone who did a giant clam with the looking out like it's from a seat, a pod, you know, that the guest rooms were within this pod and looking out. So well, that you could handle theme park in a different way, but when you have to do it their way, I think it's the end of your career.
Did you want to add anything, Buck?
No. It's a great thing about Singapore. At least you have a little bit more authentic theme park. Not very, you know, it's nature. It has a theme. It's great. I mean, that's another strategy for tourism, business strategy, design experience. You know, it's a great thing. And compared to, I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to do a Disneyland. You know, so those are things that are highly temporal, very temporary. Why not? Why not? We're time's up. Yeah, we can. So, but yeah, maybe when I mature myself a little bit more and probably get a little bit more higher understanding of, you know, maybe I'd pull that off. But now I don't know if I can do that theme park.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up now. But as we talk about theme parks and precedent, actually, most of the theme parks were sort of, as you mentioned earlier, were conceived out of other existing buildings, like Harry Potter. Going back to Harry Potter, not only the staircase, but the Durham Castle, and also narrative. Yes, very true, and many more, like the Munich Castle as well, was for Disney, I believe. So I think that's all the time we have, unfortunately. But the good thing is, you'll all be able to catch Monsum's lecture tonight at 6 p.m. And don't forget Chat's lecture tomorrow. So thank you, guys. Any questions? Just one question, one or two questions from the audience. None? Oh, 5 questions from the audience.
Hi, my name is Jason from the Philippines. My question is more towards Wong Mun Soon. I've experienced a lot of your buildings, particularly the ones in Singapore, and I must say each one of them is a very unique experience in itself, right? My question is towards texture. Since we're talking about perception and sensibility, I was wondering what your thoughts are behind this idea of texture and its potentiality in influencing a particular experience of space. Because I've noticed that buildings that you've produced always have very complex, interesting textures to them, which enhances the experience. So that's actually my first question. The second question is, I know that you are also involved with quite a lot of projects outside of your context or Singapore. So you're doing projects in Taiwan, in India, and so on. So I was just very curious also how you deal with how different the things are in those countries, particularly the government, the rules, the regulations, and how those constraints sort of fueled the design direction of your projects there. Thank you.
I think the first question for me is about materiality, I think. I will talk about maybe 3 materials that I'm particularly quite fond about. One is using plants, vegetation as a material. And I think that is something that is very suitable in the tropics. And in light of where we are in the world today, with global warming and sort of cities getting congested and crowded, plants does help in controlling urban heat island effect in the buildings. And I think it can, if it's an aggregation of more buildings of this nature, we could actually overcome urban heat island in the city. I have data on this, and now the momentum is building up that people are actually studying the good effects of having vegetation on buildings. And I think to the point now it's become everyone wants to put a tree on a building because it looks right, But I think we got to do it for the right reason. So I will talk about it a little bit later in the talk. But the other one that I really like to use a lot is mirror. And for me, mirror is, again, maybe why I like so much about the transformative quality of the Harry Potter staircase is that mirror does a certain things too. It demilitarizes materials. And sometimes it gives you illusions that are actually very fun, and that it takes you into a different direction completely. And for us, like when we do a lot of vegetations in buildings and doing sky gardens, but the gardens in the sky are only effective for people who see them at a higher level, or if you're in the particular level where you can actually see the plants itself. But for the person on the street, you can't exactly see them. But if you had a mirror on the ceiling, you actually would allow people to see it as a reflection. It is a very interesting thing. And I think because we did that, people who doesn't actually use the building, people who actually walk the ground and the streets would actually pass a comment to us or would stop to take a photograph. And it's actually really because of the material that we used in it. And I think that is a nice material to use. I think the last one I would say as a material is it's not a material, it's really air, basically, where we like to actually not design with physical forms, but actually it's the absence of services and forms is actually the negative. And if you look at some of our projects, they tend to be quite bulky and big and massive. And it's because we conceive of the negative space first before we actually conceive of the physical space. And I think that is something I think in our architecture is a little sort of peculiar. So, and I think those would be my response to your questions.
Anybody else? Okay, so I think nobody? Okay, I think that's all the time we have, right? So thank you everybody for coming. The speakers, if you look to your left or your right, there's a little light bulb. That's a small token from Anthology. So we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. So thank you so much, guys, for listening. Thank you so much for that very engaging discussion. To our panelists, Mr. Chat, Sir Buxia, Mr. Anthony Nazareno, and of course, Mr. Wong Mun Sum. And thanks for moderating it, Miss Rebecca Plaza.